Olá, welcome to the Innovations for the Future Game World Builder interview. Today with Sam. Sam, thank you for accepting my invitation to this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Sam, you are building a game world in Santiago do Cacém that is called Traditional Dream Factory, that I have the pleasure to be there and visit and with you and also with other friends. Can you say in your words, what is Traditional Dream Factory?
Yeah, so we're trying to create a regenerative way of life. And so we're building a space out of an abandoned chicken farm where we are creating co-living, co-working, co-housing, event space, makerspace, food forest, orchard, garden, kind of trying to close some of the loops and trying to bring more circularity in the economy that we're building, and trying to also be a bit of an interface between human and nature, between technology and nature. And so we've been pioneering at this kind of frontier, creating a Web3 token-based economy that gives you access to space-time at TDF, and also trying to track our impact in the space, and utilizing blockchain protocols that enable us to quantify and measure our impact.
Thank you. There is so much there, so much innovation that you guys are experimenting there that I want to go by parts. And my proposal is for you to tell a little bit the story of the Traditional Dream Factory, because it didn't start yesterday, and it has a story, and also the story is connected with your story. After you arrived in Portugal, what you decide to do. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, so so my background is I'm French and Danish by birth, and that's where I grew up, and I studied photography and cinema and arts, and I was always in this intersection between arts and technology myself. And then I was living in New York before moving to Portugal, and that's when OASA was born. OASA is the network of these spaces that we want to develop, TDF being the first one of them. And at the time, I was a digital nomad, so I had a remote job and I was just traveling the world, having this kind of freedom to be location independent. But as I was doing that, I was traveling the world and being able to bring my income wherever I was going. I was also quickly realizing that there was a lack of capacity for having spaces where you can actually build roots and where you can actually leave a positive trace. And that generally, as you're interacting with a global economy, we're just leaving a negative trace. We're just leaving negative externalities wherever we go. You can see it like with very simple things like our trash. If you go to an Airbnb in South Africa or whatever, you might not even have recycling in your Airbnb, and like when that's your life, when that's the lifestyle that you choose, then you have like a pretty big impact that you don't necessarily have an influence over, and you're kind of at the mercy of the market. So I started this journey of, well, first of all, wanting to just build spaces that reconnect us to nature. And so it was, the idea of building beautiful homes in the middle of nature where you get access to community still, and you get access to all the amenities that you need as a modern citizen to be able to remain productive. So having access to nice co-working spaces, satellite internet, whatever you need. But also just getting access to more the cultural aspects and all the wellness facilities and access to good food and all the kind of things to make you more creative as a human. So that's been the journey, and then TDF was born. We found the land about 3 years ago, and it was just a big abandoned chicken farm with 1,500 square meters of existing building. So it felt like a nice kind of blank canvas to create our dream on, and that's where we began.
Thank you for sharing that. And can you say more about, you are experimenting with the ownership and the model of ownership and co-owning. Can you say more about that? What is the purpose and what you guys are exploring with that?
Yeah, so the sense of ownership, the right to own, actually comes from Roman law, and it's a right to get the use of, the right to get the fruit of, and the right to destroy. Getting the use of is pretty simple. Getting the fruit of generally means like the income from, if you're looking at a business or something like that, and the right to destroy, those are kind of the categories of rights associated with ownership ever since Roman times, and that would apply to anything that you can own, from like bottles that I have, I purchased this morning, so I have the right to smash it if I want to. I can do whatever I want with it. I don't have any responsibility to anyone. It goes the same with land, or it goes the same with humans. If you own slaves, or if you own animals, you have the right to destroy them. And that's not really a sense of ownership that we identify with. And so when we started this project, basically we started having this inquiry of what does it actually mean to steward land. And so we started building a model utilizing technology where the goal is to transition us back to a more indigenous sense of ownership, which is a right of stewardship. And the right of stewardship is the right to care for and the right to get the fruit of. So you still have this aspect of like, if you plant a garden, you have the rights to get the vegetables from it. But it's not like you have the right to just go around and just extract. It's more this idea that we're here to leave a positive trace, and in doing so, we can collect some benefits. But remembering that leaving that positive trace is really the reason why we're here in the first place, and not vice versa. Like, we owe the world, and it's not the world that owes us. And so we try to build a technology system around this principle of stewardship. And the way that it looks like basically is you have this idea of the commons. In our case, the land is the land is a commons, but the commons can represent any kind of good or service that that benefits everyone. So like clean air, water, and all of these things are the general commons that we've been extracting from over the last centuries. And so the idea is that OASA is designed as a nonprofit that takes land out of the public market to put it into this new form of common that's not owned by a nation state, or is not owned for private interest. It's really designed with certain principles in mind, which is, for example, 50% of the land to be rewilded, 45% of the land to be used as edible landscapes, so regenerative agriculture, food forestry, and all these kind of things, and only 5% of the land to be used for human housing, so constructing buildings on it. So it's creating a little bit of a new category of land conservation that sit somewhere between like residential real estate and national parks, somewhere, and something like that. And then we build a technology layer that basically enables us to translate this into code. So we have a token. The token gives you access rights to the lands. So there's no one else owning the land besides the nonprofit that then issues this token. And this token is the only way to get perpetual access rights to the land. So it's a bit like a timeshare. That's what you can compare it with, but it's a timeshare that first of all, it's perpetual, and it's flexible, and it comes with governance rights as well. So you still get to decide how your accommodation looks like. You get to take part in this kind of economies that we're building on the site. But underneath it all, there's the promise that we're stewarding this land. We're not owning it and extracting from it. So the idea is, as long as our economies thrive and the project continues, the lands will be conserved and the regional principles by which we abide will be respected. And so basically it's a tool to transition land into this new form of commons.
And the non-profit, it's a Portuguese one or it's international one?
The non-profit is based in Switzerland.
In Switzerland.
And so that's where we have the bridge between the legal realm and the crypto space. So basically we built a technology platform that enables us to distribute access rights and governance rights and to coordinate a group of humans. And then this gets into the legal realm through a Swiss nonprofit. The Swiss nonprofit acts a little bit like a land trust. Because yeah, there is no land trust in Portugal. I know like Terragora is trying to do something like that, but yeah, basically that was the best form of legal structure that we could do to both bridge this idea of well, first of all, like distributed governance rights and this whole like tokenomics aspect. So like the technology company and representing that into the legal realm, but also bridging the whole ecological conservation side of it. And so those things get combined in the nonprofit in Switzerland. And then this nonprofit in Switzerland then owns a company in Portugal that's actually doing the development work, that's acquiring the land and so on.
Okay, and traditionally in fracking in Santiago do Cacém, it's the prototype, it's the first thing that is happening around that. And can you say more about the governance? Because you are a very, how to say, you are a crowd in the sense that you are not one people, you are a lot of people and a lot of people going in and going out. Can you talk more about that? How do you make decisions? What is the kind of governance that you apply? And this kind of stuff.
Yeah, so we had a few iterations of our governance model. I would say like the first year we started out with like really like what is a really minimum amount of governance that we can do, and we were a lot of the initial group also comes from like Burning Man culture, and so Burning Man is Burning Man is like this pop-up city where you build a city basically in a few weeks, and then we celebrate, and then at the end of the week you tear down the whole city. And so there's a lot of experimentation that can go on in these areas, and the city is divided into camps, and so each camp is like your little neighborhood that's in charge of building whatever. And I think in Burning Man culture, like duocratic principles are quite strong. So duocracy is basically when whoever does the job actually gets to decide how things are done. So it's not like top down, whatever. It's really like more bottom up approach. I think that works really well for this kind of scale, this kind of project, as long as there's no like huge budgets and so on. So I say that was the first iteration, and so just kind of having more bureaucratic style, like we just get things done basically on the ground. And there was no big budget and so on anyway, like in the first time. Then the second layer was we kind of tried to build a sociocratic structure to give a bit more higher level governance. And then we started to organize in circles. We had circles for like architecture, for land management, for like all of these different areas. And we were playing with that for a while. And then at some point we realized that was just like too much, losing too much steam in that. And so then there's also like a conflict a little bit between execution and decentralization. Basically, like if you have like 100 different people who are providing input on how to do things, but not actually doing them, then you're just losing momentum and gets really tiring, especially for the team. And so then basically about a year ago, we kind of reshuffled again. And a little bit of the structure of what we've landed is that we still have like an executive team, which is basically in charge of running the project and makes the decisions. And I'm currently the executive director of the project, which means that I kind of do what I want as long as it fits with our master plan. So the idea is we have like a pre-approved plan, and it's been approved by the municipality and so on. So we know what we're building. We know more or less how much money we need for it, and we kind of know the general direction. So then this executive team is, oh, my headphones just there. So then this executive team is able to make the decisions that go in that direction. And then we have the DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization, which is basically, when I stepped down actually from my role as executive director in the spring, and then I had to pick it up again because our interim CEO didn't stick. But basically what I described a little bit is that we try to have this separation of power. So you have the executive team, which is in charge of executing the project. And so they have all the rights to make the decisions that go in the same direction that we agreed to. Then we have the more, let's say, legislative power, which is a DAO, which is in charge of deciding where are we actually going, what is this direction that we're targeting. And so this direction is described, for example, in our master plan, in our white paper, and these kind of documents, and pink paper as well. And so those documents kind of set the tone for, okay, what are we actually trying to build? And like certain things we can change, like for example, the OASA principle, that's like one layer below. So that's not something that's up for debate by the DAO. But anything around like, what are we actually building? How do we actually build those 5% of space as houses? How do we live together as humans? What kind of events do we want to have? All these kind of things get decided like this. And so we have this kind of general master plan. And so if we want to change the master plan, now that has to go through legislative approval. And also if you want to change executive team, that also has to go through legislative approval. So basically the DAO still is in charge of making the big decisions, but is not so present in the day-to-day operations of how we're actually doing these things.
Sam, can you say more about what is a DAO, and why did you choose a DAO structure to be a strategic component in your governance?
Yeah, so a DAO is basically it's a way to organize using technology. And so it's, to me, a DAO is a treasury. So it's like a shared bank account. So I mean, you can also look at it like a company or whatever, but essentially it's a treasury and then you have a governance model that says how you take decisions, and you have a certain purpose. So a bit similar to an association or company or whatever, where you have like your statutes, which declare, okay, what are you doing together? And then you have your bank account. And then like, depending on the type of legal structures that you have, then you have like certain kind of governance that comes associated with it generally. But in a DAO, it just enables you to connect some of these like governance functionality and treasury functionality and all of that to more to the technological realm, where there's been a lot of innovation. So the last 5 years, that's kind of when the first DAO started to appear. You have a lot of people that have played around with all kinds of different ways to make decisions, because there's a lot of potential issues that arise when we do governance, and like the current democratic way of doing things is not really empowering to people, because they're electing people and they lose a lot of like things don't really change and so on. And so yeah, there's a lot of innovation needed in the governance realm to make decision making, first of all, more fun, more effective, and just and more fair. And so I think DAO kind of brings us innovation, and like, I don't think there's been any perfect solution yet, but I think it's an interesting space to try to see how we can come together and make decisions. And kind of the key piece that we are bringing to the puzzle is how do you actually do DAOs when it comes to like representing real physical spaces. And so we also built a technology protocol, which is called proof of presence. And so that enables now a group of humans that want to come together and take decisions on a space, to make decisions based on not just how much financial capital someone put in, but we do recognize that that's one of the components, but also like how much time did you spend in that space, and how much work did you actually put into building that space. So those are kind of three governance primitives that we have: proof of presence, proof of sweat, and the community token. And yeah, and that's really a little bit of what we want to experiment with, is like saying that if you actually come and you spend most of your year, say at TDF, then of course you should have like a lot of decision-making power around how the space actually evolves. Whereas maybe you bought a lot of tokens, but you're only coming to stay 2-3 days a year, and then you shouldn't have as much governance weight, basically. So yeah, I guess that's a little bit what we're trying to apply to it. And yeah, and I think there's many more interesting things with DAOs, and I think the whole interesting piece with blockchain is that it's composable, right? So we can use these modules from other DAOs, we can replicate what other groups of humans that work within DAOs have done around the world, and you can, like, there's all kind of experiments that have been going on with, for example, quadratic funding and quadratic voting, and all of these kind of algorithm for how you do governance. And so all of that innovation, wherever it happens in the world, can then be replicated, and the DAOs can decide to adopt it. And so it just scales the speed at which governance is evolving to the speed of technology. So hopefully we can land on better solutions for how to govern commons.
Thank you. Thank you for putting that in an explicit way, what you are experimenting. And for my knowledge, you are one of the, in Portugal for sure, I think you are the only one that are really experimenting with the technology as a mediation. A lot of people that are working in this context of regeneration, whatever, or transforming the lifestyle, they are not using technology as a mediator to governance, to bring people together, to do the work. And you guys are experimenting in that, and that is so wow. It's really, it's like you said, the speed is the speed of the tool and the governance that is behind that. And I think that you are also very grounded in the context of, you brought a lot of innovations from the outside to the inside. Like we have a co-work, we have a co-living, we have a garden, we have a common kitchen. Yes, you have so many building blocks there. Can you talk a little bit about why you brought that to the table? Why you take that all building blocks to the same project and say this is important for what you want to do here. It's not only the forest, it's not only the garden, but we need all these social components and social structure. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I guess one of the reasons is because in a way we're kind of competing with cities a little bit. I think there's been this drain into cities since the industrial age, where cities have become this place of productivity. And so if you want to have a high-paying job, and if you want to have access to culture and to community and to all of these things, you go to the city. And so that means that all the rural areas have been depleted in terms of human capital, but also like cultural capital and all the other forms of capital have fled the countryside, basically. And so I think one of the key thing that we're trying to do here is also looking at the longer term picture of what does it actually look like to live as humans on this planet. And we always kind of had 2050 as the place where we're targeting. And we actually started OASA with a backcasting of looking, how does the world look like in 2050 and what does living look like? And a lot of these things have just like come true much quicker than we thought. Like satellite internet wasn't a thing when we started OASA, or like Starlink at least, it wasn't as accessible. Like all of these technologies make it possible to live anywhere and work anywhere and to basically have the same level of productivity as you would have in a city. And so tapping into that digital nomadism and then using the power of community and bringing people together in these spaces to actually deliver more of the needs. So it's a little bit like building the master pyramids of need, where first we need to have healthy soils and water and all of these things. And then we want to be able to cater toward those different needs so that people can have, just like more thriving lives, basically from the countryside, from the places that actually need to be regenerated. And so it's, in a way, it's to compete with the cities a little bit. But yeah, one of the ideas of TDF and OAS in general is that we want to basically be able to enable people to live in the countryside, to have access to higher level of amenities than they would have in a traditional home in a city, but also get access to better community and more culture because they have access to this internal community and have access to the tools to be productive so that they can still earn the same kind of wages as they would in a city and be having all those things to be creative and to be surrounded and to launch own businesses and whatnot. And also just simply to give them more space and time so that basically once you've done this initial investments of like creating this whole capital layers that you need, building all of the things to live properly, to have your own food, to have your own means of production and so on. Once you own all of these things collectively in your commons, then you're much less dependent on the financial system and you're able to live at a much lower cost. And so actually our goal is that your cost of living will be dropping towards close to zero over time. Like you do have that initial investment to do, but then over time, your cost of living will be dropping. So you're not actually enslaved to working your whole life in a factory just to try and pay for a mortgage for a house that you can't afford. It's kind of trying to flip that model, giving people more time back to do what they love doing and giving them all the tools so that whatever they love doing, they can actually do it in a more productive and scalable way and tapping into our own market and having our own kind of community surrounding the project so that if we launch a product, you're going to be more successful if you launch it within the communities than if you just try to do your own little piece in a vacuum.
But if I went to visit today Traditional Dream Factory, how many people will be there? 3, 10, 30?
If you went today, there would be somewhere between 5 and 10, but we're like slowly on the closing down mode because we're closing down for the season. If you had come last week, you would have had like 40 people or something like that. So it's like generally like around 20 people on the ground with like roughly 10 volunteers in general. And then, we have both people coming to volunteer. We have people coming to stay as guests who have their own kind of online work or whatever it is. And then we host events on a regular basis. And that's kind of the structure. We have like 15 glamping tents and there's like a small house on the ground. And so that's kind of the current situation. But now we have all the permitting approved to build the actual structures of the co-living. So we're building 14 suites, 4 studios, 1 house, and that's like all the co-livings that we want to raise money for now. And then in the future, there will also be like a separate kind of co-housing area with people with more permanent homes and also some tiny homes and stuff like that.
Can you talk a little bit about water, energy, this kind of stuff that is present in this transformation projects? Where are your ideas? What you are exploring with?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we're trying to create a regenerative way of life, and the ways that we measure regeneration. Now, for example, we just spent a week working on the ecological benefits framework with the folks from ReFi, and I really like this kind of areas that they propose as like the foundational ones. So it's like water, air, soil, biodiversity, equity, and I forget the last one. But I think that kind of gives like a pretty good like holistic view of everything that you need to prove that your project is healthy. And so, yeah, water is probably the biggest topic in Portugal for the next few decades. And yeah, I think like water is also not, I mean, it's not magic. Like we know what we have to do. We know that we need to reforest because trees hold more water in the root system, and it's all around capturing more water during the winter season and like retaining it for the summer months. And so we're also building a water retention landscape, building 2 lakes. And so that should be sufficient water to provide for the more agricultural aspect of the project. But yeah, so basically combining reforestation and water capture systems, water retentions, landscapes, upcycling gray water. So for example, we built a heliphyte treatment system. So all of the waters from the showers and the kitchen and so on, they get cycled through our heliphyte filter, and then they get sent to our reforestation project. And we planted about 3,000 trees there, and all of that has only been fed the water from our heliphyte system. So basically, we're able to convert these waters that we're using into biomass, and then that biomass is like trees growing and creating life and actually sequestrating more rainwater. So kind of building these positive cycles and trying to come out of the negative cycles that we tend to have in our current economy.
And yeah, thank you for that. And the energy.
Yeah, and the energy, I guess it's, yeah, I mean, this one is also quite straightforward in Portugal. We have so much sun. So we already have some solar panels on the ground. And also we have 1,500 square meters of roofs just for the chicken farm. And so that's what we want to be covered with solar. Down the road, for now, we installed 7 kilowatt, which is pretty much our current consumption. And yeah, and then we're just gonna be keeping on adding to that, also with intent to not only be energetically self-sufficient for ourselves, but also to start taking into consideration more of the neighborhood, more of the city, and actually we can create a microgrid. So actually being able to sell our energy directly into the town at a much better rate than if we're just selling it to the grid, for example. So yeah, so that's something that we're doing. I guess like then we're also like I think the biggest thing for us is like soil after that. So like restoring soil, like a lot of the land is quite degraded, and with climate change and with a lack of water in summer, it's becoming harder and harder to grow anything in Portugal, and it's becoming harder and harder to have sheep or anything, like any kind of animals grazing on the land, because there's just no grasses in the summers anymore. And so yeah, so we're also measuring basically our impact on the soil, where like, I mean, we're doing agroforestry system, which is bringing a lot more nutrients into the soil. So producing biomass that get turned into carbon compounds that go into the ground, and being able to basically sequester also carbon, so also cleaning the air in that process. And yeah, that's kind of what we're doing.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's like you are painting a flower. You are open the petals of the flower, and we are seeing how beautiful is the flower that you guys are experimenting there. It's Yeah, thank you for doing that for all of us. You talk about the community that is around, the local community, local city, you talk about with the energy. Can you say more? Always your thoughts about how to interwoven with the community, how to interlink, how to bring that people together? And yeah, can you say more about that? What is how you are grounding traditional dream fract in that place, in that village, in that city, in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're quite lucky in Portugal that the culture is really welcoming, and you can come with a crazy project like TDF, and actually people are not gonna judge you, and they're gonna more just like welcome you for what you can bring. And I was talking earlier about this fleeing from rural areas into cities, and I think Portugal is, yeah, one of the areas in the world where that's been most affected by that. Like you have entire towns and cities where you don't have any young people, and including Abela, a small town where we are. It's a small town of 400 people, but most people are above 60. You have a few young families, but then the majority of people is really like that older generation. And Abela is not what it used to be. Like 100 years ago, it was a completely different story. You would have town parties with like thousands of people coming, and you had like all the local kind of agricultural goods, like the cork and the pigs and so on, which was more flourishing back then. And I'm not exactly sure what is like the only reason for that, but today, like you can really see the decline around Portugal, basically like loss of population and these kind of rural areas getting more and more desertified. And so, yeah, so like, I think with that background in mind, like maybe it was a bit easier for us to integrate, but then also the second aspect is the buildings where we have been were actually used for the town parties during the 15 years after it wasn't a chicken farm anymore and that they were just abandoned. And so that meant that we already had great kind of local connection with the people from the town, and we kind of tried to maintain that culture. And so, yeah, we bring together the locals once in a while, and we just have like the traditional kind of parties, festas, and then we also launched like a cinema club, for example, this year. So we had like a few movie nights, and then the people from the town come, and that's something that was actually quite popular, where that was actually like a need like for something cultural. And so yeah, both the young people and the old people actually were really liking kind of having these movies. And then I think there's a big thing around education, and I think there was a big desire from us to not come in and try to preach something that like, because we're saying that we're doing this regenerative agriculture and so on, but how can you actually say that that's better to someone who has been there and farming for their whole life, and maybe depleting the soil, but also like having a lot of knowledge there and a lot of traditions that you have to work with. But people also realize intuitively when things are actually creating more life. And so we have this idea of more leading by example and creating, for example, a thriving food forest so that when people come and visit, they will get inspired because they will just look at it and they will see the impact that it can have and all the benefit that it can have. And we already had a few examples of this coming to life. Like we planted potatoes the first year, and we did it in like permaculture way with like a lot of mulching and all that. And right next to us, our neighbor planted potatoes, but in the very traditional Portuguese way, with like just like exposed topsoil. And then the sun came, and all of these potatoes just burned, and all of ours looked really good. And so actually the locals came and talked to us during the local town party, and they were asking us about it. And so that was just like a good example of how we want to do it. It's like trying to inspire people to do like positive things with the land. And so now we just dug like our first swale also, which is collecting all the excess rainwater instead of being stuck in the valleys. so they get spread throughout the land, and being able to, that any kind of excess rainwater would basically get stored. And we did this with locals, so they might not really know what a swale is, but like now they actually built one for us, like because we use their tractors and so on, and we had them actually dig it for us. And so the hope is that as we do more and more of these kind of projects, that they will also start to take notice, and they will start to have like this learning cycle, and maybe they will start to make swales on their own lands because they see that it's actually working and so on. But that's like a longer term story, I think.
Yeah, thank you. The other area that I'd like to make questions around is the investment. You are also experimenting with that. Can you say more about how you are bringing the money to the equation, and what are your plans about that?
So I mean, I guess you can look at it from so many different lenses. You can look at it from the fiscal Portuguese authorities, and to them, where this kind of rural hotel business, bringing together members who, so just creating this kind of rural hotel basically. And so our finances is around just booking out rooms, like guest stays, but it's also around building food systems that can create some financial revenue. And I guess like from the perspective of the members, what we're trying to create is a token that gives you access to an economy. So our token gives you this timeshare access to the space. And so this year we were experimenting with, we launched a token in the summer. It wasn't a very good year to launch a token. There's a crypto bear market, and people were it wasn't like that well received. But basically the idea of the token is that we can do an exit to community. And in our case, it's like even like an exit to the commons, because by buying the token, you're actually putting the land into the common, and you don't have a claim on anything. Like the token is, it's a donation into a nonprofit that acquires the land and does the transformation. And then what you get in exchange is access to time in that space. So in doing that, we're already losing the sense of ownership, where if we had done it with, say, equity, then it would basically be investors owning the project, and then they would be able to decide how, what to do with it. So basically we created this token economy, and well, it's not fully working yet. Like we haven't been able to raise the amount of money that we need to build this project, but that's really what we want to bring, and the ways that we want to raise the money, because it's the way that is the most aligned. So we don't take forms of capital that have interests that are different from the vision that we're trying to achieve. But so that's kind of a little bit what we're trying to do. And I think now we're shifting that a little bit to think of it more in terms of the medium term. We want to have people buy the token to get the access, but also in the short term, we also just need much more capital than what we were able to raise so far with the token. So now we're also considering taking investment in the form of real estate bonds. So kind of like loans that would be backed by the value of the real estate assets. So if things went south, then investors would end up owning the project. But if things went well, then ideally basically would be transitioning the land into the commons over time, as people buying the token will be basically buying out the investors. So that's the model that we have.
Yeah, but with this sharing about technology and technology mediation, I don't want that people that are listening take a wrong idea. You guys are very personal in the contact, and you use a lot of tools for engaging people and bring people together and speak and has this in-person contact. Yes, you use the technology as a facilitator, as a mediator for something, but the action occurs in the place and in traditional factory in Santiago, and you use a lot of social technologies for bringing people together, for taking in collective intelligence from them, from using that. And I'd like also that you have a word about that, about how important it is for people to be together, to have a meal together, to hug each other, to be in small teams, for having a conversation for something that really matters for them, this kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it is building a life together, right? It is living the way, creating and providing, and we're trying to reimagine what living looks like in the future. And the technologies that we're building closer, the goal was always to support bringing people closer. It's bringing people, it's creating physical contact with the least amount of clicks is one of the philosophies that we have for the technology. Is like, technology is great as long as it can serve the purpose of actually bringing us together, actually bringing us on the land, actually being regenerative. So yeah.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for this picture. This is a big invitation for people that don't know tradition in factory to go there, to have a hug with Sam and with the team, and to put the hands in the land and help doing the work. There is so much work to do there, and the one that is Mac is really amazing. Thank you for that. And I'd like to go in a more personal context. How this is huge thing. This is. We had I don't know, maybe 40, 45 minutes conversation about describing the experiments that you are doing in so many fields. Wow, this is so huge. Can you say more about how you take care of yourself, what you do to be to be in your alignment? What is the kind of routines that you do for having the smile, having this conversation, wake up with the yes, yesterday didn't went so well, but today I will do it. And can you say more about that? What you do to take care of yourself?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think one of, like, it is very overwhelming, first of all. Like, I want to acknowledge that building a village is like fucking hard, and that's why 95% of them fail. And I think the time when I'm most stressed and so on, it's because it becomes this overwhelming meta kind of thing, and it's really hard to take action. I think the counterbalance to that is that actually the lifestyle itself is quite healthy, because you're spending time mixing, doing some maybe software development, and then you go out into the field and you're actually planting trees or whatever you're doing. And you're getting all of your social needs met. You always have friends around, surrounded. So, I mean, in some senses, it can be, it can look like very overwhelming and big and like stressful to do. And on the other hand, I think once you commit to being on the land and to actually building this thing, then I think like mixing both like the modern digital citizen lifestyle of doing software development and working on all these systems and bringing people together, organizing events and all these kind of things, and mixing it with this like real connection to the land and being in nature and being out there digging trenches when it rains, and just like, I think this intersection of like nature and working online, I think is really healthy. I think also being too much in the field is also like very hard work, obviously, and not healthy, but being in an office all day and never seeing the real sun is also very unhealthy. So I think as humans, we actually thrive from having these different experiences. And when I first moved to Portugal, I think you know him, Joaquim. He also does like avocado forest stuff. he was always talking about agro yoga. uh, and I like this concept that, yeah, it's like, if you get a bit tired of being on your laptop, then you just go out in the field and you do some field work, and then all of a sudden you feel much better. And then if you did like a whole morning of, I don't know, planting potatoes or whatever that you did, then it's also nice to go and chill for a few hours and just be on your laptop and do something different. So I think the kind of balance that you can find in doing the work, I think that's what keeps me afloat, what makes what keeps me alive and what keeps me healthy. Um, and yeah, I mean, compared to like a life in a city, of being lonely and disconnected and all these kind of things. And I had these moments, working remotely for US corporation, like those moments where I would be in cities and really feeling really disconnected from people. Whereas here, it's like there's not a single day when I'm not surrounded with a lot of beautiful friends and eating delicious foods. And yeah, and I guess that's, yeah, the nutrition part of it is like you just like outdo yourself when you're like living in a community, getting a lot of the veggies from the farm and just eating really healthy food. And yeah, I haven't eaten more healthy in my life than these few years, just like living in this kind of regenerative project. And yeah, since this year, we've been producing about 50% of our own foods from our garden. And so yeah, I think all the pieces are there to live a really healthy life. And I mean, personally, I kind of thrive living in this kind of meta future perspective. And I really want to imagine that we can create a better world. And it's sometimes a bit hard because the world is really fighting against, and we're stuck in this system that's really degenerative. And shifting the needle towards a regenerative system is really, really hard. But yeah, like the purpose of the mission, and I think the purpose of regeneration in general, is something that can become a northern star for all of humanity, really. Like, we need to wake up, and regeneration is the thing that can align us. And in the depths of our own demise, where we have lost most of, like, we don't have religion and all of these things anymore to give us something bigger than ourselves to think about. And the planet is dying. Like, we lost 70% of all wildlife. And I think this as a mission can be something that can actually give us a purpose that's big enough to fill the void that we have.
Thank you, Sam. And I also know that you take care of yourself in this process of continue learning. We meet each other in several retreats and several, let's say, degrees or courses. I don't know, like the leadership program that Rebundance did, or other kind of retreats. And you have this investment in yourself and always finding the next thing for you, or is your evolution, taking care of yourself. You don't are all time in tradition in practice. You also use time for you and time for seeing the world, and continue open your mind. That is
That's really
also
important. Yeah, actually today we're in Montemoro Novo. We're visiting some friends' project here, so we were in Fresco de Mayo this morning. We saw Mark Lieber's agroforest, and tomorrow we'll be in Gandum. So yeah, I think it's really healthy to step out of your project and go into the world, and then come back with good ideas.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. And we are here almost 1 hour, and I have a last question for you. It's, in your own words, what is your essence? What is the essence of this being that are in front of me?
The essence of my being. I'm definitely I have a big inner child, very playful. So yeah, I tend to see a lot of life through play. And yeah, like in my own kind of Maslow's pyramid that I was describing earlier, like you have basically what I've done is I've added like the layer below, which is like the soil and the water and the biodiversity. But then the rows above, what comes up for me is like play and then regeneration as like a northern star. So I think that's kind of my essence, is like regeneration as like the core purpose and trajectory, and play in how I want to actually connect with this life and how I want to interact. And so yeah, I think that's my essence.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for accepting this invitation for this conversation and to bring the wisdom, what you are learning in this very beautiful experiment that you are doing that here for all of us, for benefit of all of us. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Marco.